1.5 is doable in the quarter, with or without stimulus?
No, I mean, I think what we learned this morning is that GDP remains 3.5% below its pre-crisis peak, as Tyler said. And that's actually about the same as the worst point in the last recession, the one we used to call the Great Recession. It's a gap of $750 billion. That's where GDP is relative to where it was, or $6,000 per household. I think it's also important to reflect, as you mentioned, lots of intricacies here. The report is old news. It reflects growth from earlier in the quarter, and we know that jobs and GDP and income have downshifted since then, and as Tyler himself acknowledged. Since that point, poverty's up 8 million since May. 1 in 5 small businesses have closed. We're down 11 million jobs. We learned this morning that 23 million people are filing UI claims. So one of the things I'm finding really disconcerting this morning is hearing some folks in the administration talking about mission accomplished, roaring economy. I mean, this is an economy with recessionary conditions for many of the people in it.
Jared, I guess, not the first time the question will be posed, though. How does taking corporate tax back to 28 create more jobs?
Well, first of all, you have to recognize that that's an increase for folks above $400,000 AGI. That's the top narrow slice of the income scale. And if you look at the corporate tax rate, just the mechanics of it, you pay the corporate tax if you're highly profitable. If you're unprofitable or you have losses, as recent newspaper articles have reflected, you take losses. So the corporate tax rate, and tax expert Kim Klausing recently pointed this out, is a counter-cyclical tax. Again, you only pay it if you're highly profitable. And as I just heard, listening to some excellent reports on your station, there are some highly profitable companies out there. So this both helps raise some of the revenue for the critical Building Back Better agenda of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, as well as not putting everything on the credit card. So it's a pay for.
Where would that revenue go toward? Would it be solely to fund the additional stimulus, or would it be more targeted in terms of getting the economy back to where we were pre-crisis?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in my view, and I'm speaking to you as a Keynesian economist, not so much as an informal advisor, I think temporary stimulus measures should generally be deficit financed. The fact that interest rates are so low, essentially you have these key economic variables, both this massive output gap that remains after today's report, and very low interest rates kind of screaming at us to do a fiscal relief package. And by the way, I liked a lot of the things that Tyler was listing that should be in the package. What I really don't like is the absence of leadership from President Trump in getting that package across the goal line. And this is something that Joe Biden has deep muscle memory of since the Recovery Act. The pay-fors are for the more permanent agenda. It's going to be much harder to sustain deep investments in clean energy, childcare, elder care, education, housing, a public choice option for healthcare without pay-fors that will help sustain those programs over the long term.
Jared, we had the CEO of Carrier join us a little earlier in the program, pointing to the positives and negatives potentially of a Biden presidency, but seemed enthused by the prospect of infrastructure spending. We've talked a lot about it. We haven't seen anything, obviously, over these last 4 years, and we didn't really see a lot from the Biden-Obama administration, at least after the very early infrastructure spend. What chance is there really we'll see something significant?
It's a great question. It's such an important area, and the chance is high, 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 very high. And the reason I say that is twofold. One, the Biden-Harris agenda is just incredibly deep in this space, whether it's clean energy, whether it's electric vehicles and their charging stations, whether it's onshoring manufacturing jobs to help do some more traditional infrastructure, whether it's a grid. These are all measures in the proposal. But here's the other part that I think in many ways is just as hopeful. I've spent a lot of time up on the Hill in the last few years, and I have heard Democrats and Republicans say with a great intention that they want to do an infrastructure plan. This is a bipartisan issue. And there aren't too many of those these days. What's missing has been presidential leadership. And I'm telling you, I've heard this from both sides of the aisle. There just has never been a plan. There have been these phony infrastructure weeks, but there's never been a plan for an infrastructure program.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.